Hi everyone, Miles here. I just wanted to go over something that I forgot to include in my Thomas and Friends Characters Explained Edward video. Edward also has a spotlight episode in Season 12 Steady Eddie where he takes the water wheel and the water wheel falls onto Gordon's flatbed. And soon Edward caught up with Gordon and saved his water wheel from the smelters. But anyway, let's get into my next Thomas and Friends Characters Explain video that I am doing, which this time is going to be Henry the Green Engine. Henry is a big green tender engine, one of the strongest big engines on the Sodor Railway, almost as big as Gordon. He is kind and well-mannered, he respects little engines, he's a mixed traffic engine, he's the third engine on the Northwestern Railway, and he pulls goods trains from Sodor to the mainland, especially one fish train called the Flying Kipper. And he does also sometimes pull the express. He is very well behaved, but sometimes is a little arrogant and vain at times, depending on how annoyed he is. But when he is alone, he likes nature, especially the forest. He also screams a lot. Without further ado, let's get into his history, basis, and almost everything about him. Shall we? Henry's backstory is one of the most complex and sad of all the other characters. To understand his origin, you have to understand the context of the illustrations in the first 4 books of the Railway series. When Wilbur Awdry came up with the stories for the first of his books, The 3 Railway Engines, he had 3 different engines in mind, a 440 named Edward, a 462 named Gordon, the most modern and high-class railway traction back then, and a 442 Atlantic called Henry, a more contemporary engine at the time. Henry was the middle size of the 3 engines as in wheel configuration. Awdry's reference clearly depicted Henry as an Atlantic with 442 wheel arrangement. But however, illustrator named William Middleton did not make Henry the same way that Awdry had hoped for, but instead made him a 462 kind of like Gordon in the final publication. Awdry was mad about the end results because he did not get the Henry locomotive he had asked for. He was so angry about the drawings that the publisher Edmund Ward told William Middleton to leave and not to return as an illustrator for the next book. The second book, Thomas the Tank Engine, was illustrated by Reginald Payne, who approached the style differently and delivered a fresh, realer take on the characters, which started to resemble real-life engines. Gordon was a Doncaster A1, and Thomas closely resembled a Brighton E2, but unfortunately, Payne also did not illustrate Henry the way Awdry had wanted him as. Instead, Payne drew him and made him nearly a replica of Gordon, rectangle buffers, and more. The most interesting feature on Henry was that he had a copper chimney cap, the kind used on Great Western engines. The first 2 Railway series books had 2 different illustrators, and both times Henry was drawn incorrectly. But then, Dalby was going through mental health issues and could not return to illustrate the 3rd book. So therefore, Clarence Dalby took Payne's place and illustrated the 3rd Railway series book, James the Red Engine, onwards. Some of Payne's traits were carried over, particularly noticeable on Henry, who maintains the rectangle buffers and copper chimney. But in 1949, Dalby had re-illustrated the first 2 Railway series books back in 1949 to be consistent in his style, removing these features from Henry, and only left them on Henry in the 4th Railway series book, Tank Engine Thomas Again. In that book, Henry was blue instead of green. In his reillustrations of the 3 railway engines, Dalby also incorrectly illustrated Henry as a 460. No! 3 mistakes already, which really annoyed Audrey. Audrey admitted that he did not like Henry at all, especially because the illustrators didn't get him right, and he wanted to write a story where Henry becomes sick and gets sent off from the railway, never to return. This is why Henry was written as sick in Book 2, Thomas the Tank Engine, in the chapter Thomas's Train, and in Tank Engine Thomas Again in the chapter Thomas and the Guard, which also happened in the Season 1 episodes A Big Day for Thomas and Thomas and the Conductor. Audrey laid the groundwork for Henry's eventual leave. However, children came in and asked him to write more stories about Henry. Audrey changed his mind and agreed to work with the character to amuse his readers. If he didn't have the engine he wanted, he was going to come up with a backstory to explain his awkward appearance cure the island of Sodor. It's Deep Lord time, and this is Henry's official backstory. In 1919, a scandal occurred at Doncaster Works. Rival builders of Sir Nigel Gresley stole drawings of his proposed 462 Pacific. The thieves ended up stealing the wrong drawings, a flat design that Gresley had chucked. The builder had built the locomotive in secret only to notice the mistake too late in the building progress. The end result was Henry, a flawed Pacific with a tiny firebox squeezed between its rear drivers. The builder was happy to unload his whack engine onto the first desperate buyer by the name of Sir Topham Hatt. Sir Topham Hatt was desperate for a big engine to run its new main line. He was in search of an Atlantic, which is what Audrey had wanted and hoped for. He got Henry for cheap and was very upset when Henry arrived. He would complain, "I want an Atlantic! That sent me that!" His small firebox made him a bad steamer and couldn't perform to Hatt's needs. His performance led to the purchase of Gordon, who took over the Express, but Henry still had a lot of issues. His poor steaming continued, and sometimes he was so sick that he couldn't work at all. After he got shut up in the tunnel in the railway series and TV series, it was clear that Sir Topham Hatt was done with his new engine. Henry got his own book in 1951, which was the 6th book of the railway series. This is where Audrey wanted to work on Henry into a character he could really use instead of writing him off. This is the first book that the engines get visible numbers on them, especially Henry with number 3 on his tender. In this book, Hatt decided to put an end to Henry's steaming troubles once and for all. He brought special Welsh coal which burned better and produced more steam, and Henry finally worked properly, which made Sir Topham Hatt very happy. That winter, Henry was to pull a non-stop fish train to Manchester called the Flying Kipper. On the way, ice froze a set of points and the signal, and Henry went full speed into a siding where he crashed into a freight train. In the railway series, when he crashed, he veered and laid derailed to the left, but in the TV episode, he laid derailed and veered to the right. Sir Topham Hatt reassured Henry,
"Cheer up, Henry. It wasn't your fault. Ice and snow caused the accident."
The damage was so dire that Henry went off to Crewe to be rebuilt into a different shape, as Sir Topham Hatt says. Next year in the books, Henry returned into a completely different shape. Sir Topham Hatt sent a Gresley designed Pacific to Crewe and received a black LMS Stanier Black 5 back. Audrey never explained how Henry was rebuilt, but let's not ask questions. In fact, Henry was now an actual engine LMS Stanier Black 5 which I will explain later in this video. It was a real engine that Audrey could use for the illustrators. Thank goodness it worked. After the 6th book, all the characters are based on real-life engines, and real-life events inspired most of these stories, such as the Wisbeck and Upwell Tramway, with its engines and Queen Elizabeth coming to Sodor. I will one day make videos about the real-life events of Thomas and Friends Railway Series stories and episodes. In a way, Henry not being realistic drove Audrey to want to make the series realistic, which had a permanent, long-lasting effect on the series. I am really into that all the characters are based on real-life engines and vehicles, and most of the stories, especially from the Railway series, are based on real-life events. Therefore, we have Henry to thank for this. This somehow made Henry a sympathetic character. Henry is sometimes rude and grumpy, almost like Gordon and James. Once he goes on strike with them. He stayed in the tunnel and refused to come out because he didn't want to get his shiny new coat of paint wet. He tells 4 Ginty engines to go away when he's in the shed. He thought he was the proper engine to pull the royal train. He and Gordon made fun of Edward on multiple occasions. He bullied Duck, Doll, and Douglas when they first arrived on Sodor. He ordered Thomas to get his freight cars hitched up to his fish train. He calls James a bossy boiler when James makes a suggestion about trees. He complains about Edward on a spooky night. He complains about his boiler grumbling. Edward was the only engine kind to him after his rebuild. He thought he deserved 2 tenders like Flying Scotsman. Henry was capable enough to pull the Express. Despite being a very capable engine, his stripes in his past cause him to be very self-conscious of himself. He becomes pompous and rude at times when a tank engine is in his shed. In Duck and the Diesel engines and Diesel's Devious Deed, he was called Square Wheels by the freight cars. He really does deserve 2 tenders. In seasons 8 to 12, he wasn't as grumpy or rude as how he was in seasons 1 to 7 and the Railway series, but it did come out once in a while. But in Chris's books, Henry still remains rude and grumpy sometimes. Once, Henry had a rivalry with James. Multiple times, Henry and James were paired together. Henry gets a last laugh in Cross Lines, and James gets the last laugh in Fire Engines. They double lead the Express together. James pulls the Flying Kipper. Wilbert's final Henry story was Super Rescue. In this story, Henry rescues a broken down diesel named D261 and is trained only for another diesel to break down, and he has to rescue both at the same time. This is how Audrey worked on Henry. He starts out being pathetic and weak and ends up being the biggest chat ever. The beginning of the TV series is very much the same as in the Railway series with Henry. The episode Henry's Forest is a season 3 episode that was not based on the Railway series. Henry's passionate for nature never came up in the Railway series. Henry was sad when the forest was blown down in a storm. Audrey did not like that episode at all.
Now, what interest does a steam locomotive have in scenery?
In season 7, What's the Matter with Henry? Henry was ill and was leaking water all over the tracks. In an episode of season 8, he becomes fascinated with the wishing tree. In an episode of season 9, he tries to prevent the tree from being cut down. Season 10, he collects lots of hay bales and falls off the track. Season 11, Henry's Lucky Day, he breaks his lucky trucks and then delivers presents to the children. Season 12, Henry gets it wrong. He does the same thing again as in Season 9. In Season 10, It's Good to Be Gordon. They retconned not needing his special pull anymore, which is what I really hate. I think this is what started in Thomas and the Magic Railroad, but I am not going to talk about that movie. But I do like the episode It's Good to Be Gordon when Gordon and Henry swapped tenders because Gordon took Henry's special coal by mistake, which I already mentioned in my video about Gordon. Henry had terrible smoke coming out because he used ordinary coal instead of special coal or Welsh coal. Gordon and Henry are such a duo together. Henry was never defined as being a pathetic engine. Gordon from rivalry stories to nature-loving stories. Henry had a good range. Too bad the same cannot be said about the CGI seasons. I am going to talk a lot about Henry's basis. Henry is an LMS Stanier Black 5 460 locomotive built by William Stanier as the do anything go anywhere type of engine. A total of 842 of them were built from 1934 to 1951 for use across the LMS's system. Nearly all across the UK, they were big, powerful, could go anywhere and pull anything. The Black Fives existed until the very end of steam in 1968. They were designed to pull passenger trains and freight trains. In fact, the final ever steam-hauled mainline train on British Rail was hauled by Black 5, which was known as the Goanimate Special, and occurred on August 11, 1968, the day before British Rail steam banned across the entire system. 18 Black 5s are preserved today and can be found on several heritage railways. The rest of them were withdrawn from 1961 to 1968. These locomotives had Belpaire fireboxes, boiler pressure of 225 psi, maximum speed of 96 miles per hour, 2 outside cylinders, tractive effort of 25,455 pounds, and most had the Welshard's valve gear. Several were fitted with Caprati, and one was fitted with Stevenson valve gear. They operated from the north of Scotland to the south of England. The Belpaire firebox was invented by Alfred Belpaire in 1864. Belpaire was a Belgian who created that kind of firebox which enabled greater, more effective, and efficient steam capacity. Numbering starting in 5000, with the first 20 being ordered from Crew Works in April 1934, and a further 5020 to 5069 ordered from the Vulcan Foundry in 1933. The first of the Vulcan Foundry engines entered service in 1934, and the entire order of 50 was delivered before the first crew-built engine, number 5000, was completed in February 1935. The way Henry is handled in CGI is, to be honest, not the Henry we know. None of the characters had fallen from the source material that Henry did in these seasons. Henry's backstory isn't really dived into the CGI seasons except for a flashback in Blue Mountain Mystery, and the adventure begins where he gets shut up in the tunnel because he refused to come out of the tunnel to protect his coat of paint from the rain. I think, in my opinion, this is the most famous part about Henry. Thomas and the Royal Engine stated that Henry went to crew and was repaired. Henry still needed special coal in the CGI era. There was an episode that covers how badly he manages when he takes on regular coal. His need for coal is fixed off screen later, as all is told by Toby in King of the Railway.
Don't tell me he needs special coal again.
No, Gordon. That was fixed years ago.
How it was fixed never came up. Henry is a total scaredy engine and scared of almost everything. Henry's health and safety. Henry crashes into an old freight car and Hero helps him to the steamworks to be fixed. Every time Henry has a spotlight episode, the blenderization gets worse. The worst CGI era Henry episode was Ho Ho Snowman, where Henry was scared of a talking snowman. This episode was terrible. Henry's first spotlight episode of the New Riders was Henry's Hero, which is one of Henry's best episodes. This fix didn't last long because in the next season, Henry was scared again. Starting again in season 18, There are so many episodes with Henry being scared. He was scared of the flatbeds of fear. He's literally afraid of the rain. He was also scared of chickenpox, the abominable snowman. Why is Henry so scared of snowman? Why is Henry so scared in these seasons? He was not much like this in the early seasons. Percy used to be the scaredy one, not Henry. This is the only time in the Railway series and Model series Henry was scared, because of the first line of this chapter and episode, which was also said in Percy Takes the Plunge by Percy when he goes off to the harbor. The CGI era loved to flanderize with these characters. Gordon was always the grumpy one, James was always the selfish one, Percy was always the baby, and Henry was always screaming. They never mentioned his love for nature in the CGI era. Season 20, Henry gets the Express. Henry never gets scared and gives Gordon a big run for his money. Henry in the Dark, Henry gets back at the other engines for making fun of him, which was a big change. Henry in the Dark was Henry's final spotlight episode. In the next year, Big World Big Adventure change has happened. As you all know, Henry left the Steam team along with Edward. In Season 22, Forever and Ever, Henry proclaimed out of nowhere in a single line of dialogue that he wants to move to Vickerstown and will be leaving Tidman. Henry was replaced by Rebecca, while Edward was replaced by Nia, which I already explained in my Edward video. Henry was never meant to leave, at least not right away. Nia came in, and they needed to have Henry out to make room for Rebecca. It's also very crazy. Just add another berth to the sheds, for Christ's sake! After this, Henry showed up only a couple times a season, most times without a dialogue.
The Steamworks is pretty hot, sir.
Quiet, Henry.
It felt like they never really gave him a chance to shine as a character. It's hard as a fan to swallow this because that's never what he was about in any incarnation before this. Audrey hated when they made Henry like trees back in Season 3. I currently have a Bachmann HO scale Henry. I sold my Trackmaster Henry years ago as well. I am thinking about one day getting an HO scale LMS Stanier Black 5 from the UK, but only when these stupid tariffs that Donald Trump put on for people buying outside the US go away, for goodness sake. In conclusion, Henry has gone through a lot throughout the series, from nearly getting written off by Audrey to actually being written off from Super Chat to Scared Virgin, from Selfish Jerk to Nature Lover. Henry is one of the most well-rounded characters the Thomas series has ever presented. Thank you guys for watching. I explained almost everything there is to know about Henry. I am thinking about doing James or Percy next, but if you guys have any suggested characters I should do, let me know in the comments below. And also, watch my motor vehicle parodies and collection videos as well as the New York Auto Show vlog. And I will see you all in the next video. See you next time!